golden age of sports parts of the year. We have so much to talk about. We're going to get right into it. It's Sports QuaranTV. Good evening and welcome to Sports QuaranTV. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green. We are back on air this week. We were off last week. We had a lot going on. Gerry, we were kind of talking off camera a little bit, which is too bad because I know it's a couple weeks old now, but I was really excited last week when I was coming on to talk specifically about the fact that I was able to get away a couple weekends ago to go have a pretty big sports weekend. I got to see the Jays get eliminated. And the only reason I'm bringing this up now is because there's a cool little fun story that I had noticed that I just kind of want to share about what people were asking. A lot of people questioned about what the atmosphere was like at the Rodgers Center on Saturday night with Toronto. And as I was telling you guys off camera, what was really cool was for the first time in my life, and I wear an Apple Watch, have for a long time, when Hernandez hit that second home run at the Rodgers Center, it was so loud in there. And I've been to a lot of sporting events, but it's the first time my Apple Watch kicked off and said the decibels were so high that if it sustained 20 minutes of what it was, I'd suffer hearing loss. Then, of course, all the wind got blown out of the sails there in the sixth inning, unfortunately. But it was a really cool moment to be a part of. And then, of course, Sunday I went down and watched the Bills put a beat down on the Steelers down at Highmark Stadium, which was a great day as well. But all that to say, man, it's great that sports is back. We got baseball, football, hockey. Yes. It doesn't matter. We've got it all. The NBA is kicking off this week. So let's get right into it. We're going to start where we always start, and that's the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. A couple weeks ago, we were doing a bit of a preview talking about what to expect here in the Maritime Division. It looked at the time like the Halifax Mooseheads were the team to watch here in the Maritime Division. But don't look now. There's some other teams that are playing some very good hockey right now that might give Halifax a better run for their money.
Yeah, it's funny. It's early days again, Chris, small sample size, because the Maritime Division got shut down when Fiona blew through, and so we didn't have a weekend of action there. So the Maritime Division is at least 3 games behind on the schedule with the rest of the league, which is led by the Sherbrooke Phoenix. We'll talk about them in a moment. But the Maritime Division has Halifax on top, but just barely. Well, they're not barely. They're tied as they go into this week. But they have the better win-loss record. They have the best percentage, I guess. And what I'm finding about looking back on Halifax is that, the guy we like, Zachary Leroux, is not back from Nashville. We would anticipate he will probably come back, and what a shot in the arm that will be for them. They lead the division by scoring 25 goals in the 6 games they've played thus far, and Jordan Dumas seems to be picking up right where he left. A great rookie season last year, and he's off and running this year with 14 points in 6 games. I still think Halifax is the team. You've had an opportunity. I've had an opportunity to see St. John. Of course, they're rebuilding, and they have got beat up pretty bad on the road last weekend. But you've seen a little bit of Moncton. Do you think Moncton has something to challenge there?
So what I'll say about this Moncton is I went into the season, a couple of weeks ago while you were out. Adam London joined us, and obviously he's a big Wildcats guy himself.
Yeah,
I'd asked him. He's the know-all when it came to the Moncton Wildcats because we haven't been in the building for a long time, and he was telling me that he was expecting bigger things than people anticipated, but at the same time, the Halifaxes of the world and like these are what you should look for. But I can tell you what I've seen so far is this team has been fun to watch. You look at Ty Bell. Ty Bell's played great. Barbashev's still there looking well. You got Yoan Loshing, who's finally stepped up. I think to me, the biggest disappointment I've seen so far is goaltending. I think I'm expecting a little more from Vincent Filion. Of course, he was the big piece of that Jacob Peltier trade to Val-d'Or. But, we were talking off camera a little bit, but there hasn't really been outstanding goaltending per se in the Maritime Division.
Right.
There's been a bit of good goaltending, but, not from any of these teams. And if they could figure that out, but overall, plus the Wildcats just brought in Cole Bishop. That was a free agent out of Ontario. It was good to see him here for the Pink in the Rink weekend. So, it's been good to be able to watch junior hockey again. I've been fired up. I've been enjoying it. But if you talk about these assets, you talked about St. John being young and rebuilding, but they still have some pretty key pieces on that roster that come Christmas time and come the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Trevor Georgie's going to stockpile picks on some of these guys, and I think he's going to be just fine going into that draft next year.
You remember when Trevor Georgie drafted Joshua Waugh?
How could you
that
forget?
was the draft year. Who went third that year? That seemed to be more. Leroux went third that
Zach
year,
Leroux.
didn't he? Yeah, right. We always thought he was the better of the picks, and he might turn out to be if he's able to control his emotions a little bit better. But Joshua Waugh, Chris, he is ripping up the league. Here, he and Justin Gill are leading the Sherbrooke Phoenix and leading the league in scoring, and they're both 19 years old, which is interesting as well. Of course, Waugh was drafted by your Montreal Canadiens, and Sherbrooke is by far the class of the league, outscoring everybody. They're 8-0-1. Their only loss was an overtime loss to Rouyn-Noranda, and then Quebec's right behind them at 7-1-0-1, and both of them are in the top 10 in rankings this week in the top 10 for major junior hockey. But the other thing you mentioned about the goaltending in the division, did you notice that PEI had shifted Satney to Cape Breton, and didn't he just go into Moncton and get a shutout, a 1-0 victory for the Cape Breton Eagles, who needed it very badly in a shootout? Oh, yes, in a shootout. So they still have Lapina, which seems to be the best goalie in the division, but the division's still wide open, Chris. It'll be interesting in the days ahead, because I think Moncton has Val-d'Or and St. John this week, but the interesting matchups are in Charlottetown. Charlottetown has Halifax, Quebec, and Rouyn-Noranda coming in this week. We'll see where the rubber hits the road this week in the division.
What's crazy about Joshua Roy, and I'm not even saying this as a Habs fan, but if you look, not only did he get drafted by Montreal, he got drafted in the 5th round, Jerry.
Yes.
And they're saying that he very well could be the steal of the draft. Now, again, his size will be his biggest knock at this point. And I'll see, once you get to that level, I don't know. But either way, a 5th round pick, lighten up the league, scoring champ last year. Looks like he's well on his way. Him and Justin Gill, it'll be crazy to see what happens in Sherbrooke, but they are very dominant offensively right now. So we're going to keep a close eye on what's going on here in the Maritime Division. And who knows, maybe soon enough, you and I will be able to get back into a rink as fans for a change and maybe go grab a cold one or two. Let's stick with hockey, but let's change leagues. Let's go to the pros. I want to talk to the National Hockey League for a minute. And I want to start out on the West Coast. And I want to start with the Vancouver Canucks, because they're making history at this point, but not in a good way.
Oh, so they started the season with 4 straight games on the road, Chris, and not easy ones. They go to Edmonton, they go to Philadelphia, Washington, Columbus, and they're playing in Minnesota before they finally get to head home. So that's 10 days on the road, almost 2 weeks on the road, and that's a challenge for any team. So I still think Bruce Boudreau is a great coach, and I still think they can bounce back from this once they get home. But there's other teams in the league, Chris, that this one surprises me, that San Jose is 0-5 and Minnesota is 0-3 to start the season. Kind of a shock.
San Jose doesn't shock me so much because it looks like they've accepted the fact, the minute they move Brent Burns and other key pieces out of San Jose.
Yeah, you have a point.
It's, what I mean? Now, as far as an 0-3 situation goes, I figured they probably would have won 1 by now. But overall, it's not shocking there. I think for me, what's shocking is you look at what Philadelphia has been doing. Again, really surprising there in a good way. Absolutely love watching Leafs fans implode right now after that loss to Arizona the other night. It's shocking to me. Now, going into the season, there was a lot of speculation, and I want to talk about Philadelphia for a minute because, with Tortorella going in there was already a lot of rumors talking about no captain, going to do this, going to do that. And then all of a sudden, Philadelphia comes out flying. And all I've seen, which has been really cool, is online and social media is really praising the fact that they're demanding that Philadelphia still call up Zach McEwen at this point because they love him there. And I'm just like, look what Philadelphia's doing. There's really no room at this point, which is too bad. But they've been so fun to watch.
I thought I read somewhere that he was starting the other night, or it was being called up or something along that line. So the thing that Philadelphia is doing well, Chris, they've only allowed 6 goals in the first 3 games. And that was always the Carter Hart was always the question mark, and goaltending's always been a question mark in Philadelphia. And speaking of goaltending, what a question mark it is in Toronto now. They started a backup to their backup. And I saw a funny tweet the other day of new goalie pads had arrived
the Band-Aid
for Matt Murray, and they were Band-Aids on his legs, which was very funny. But you look no farther than Austin Matthews. In the first 4 games for Toronto, they scored just 11 goals, which is 2.75 per game. That's tough on any goaltender to try to keep any team below 3. And Austin Matthews has got a goal and an assist. That's a little bit shocking. And it's also shocking to see what Edmonton's doing. Edmonton starts the season, Chris. Think of this. They start with a 6-game homestand. They played 3 already. They've won 1, the one against Vancouver. And then they lost to Calgary, and they lost to Buffalo the other night. And it doesn't get any easier. They got Carolina, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh coming in. So this is going to be a key stretch for the rest of the month for the Edmonton Oilers, who get a 6-game homestand to start the season.
Well, the Oilers are a really interesting conversation because, of course, everybody assumed the minute Jack Campbell went to Edmonton, that was the key piece that was going to put them over the hump. And now Leafs fans are looking at it going, wow, see? maybe Jack Campbell wasn't the Holy Grail. Now, again, they'll figure it out in Edmonton, and they're going to figure it out in Toronto. They may have to acquire a goaltender, although they are very, very, very tightly up against the cap space. But Samsonov and Matt Murray and, Liljegren at this point, if you look at what they're doing now, where I do feel bad for Leafs fans is this. And I'm being sincere for a minute, Jay. Yes. I'm going to use Mitch Marner as a prime example. Obviously, Sheldon Keefe, their coach, went off the other day talking about whatever it was. He made some comments in the media that literally drove players the wrong way. They had a closed door only meeting. But then, for an example, Mitch Marner went out and sent a tweet out today saying that he was going to be gaming with a celebrity streamer or something like that to play video games. And he got roasted because they're like, you should be focusing on hockey and not video games. Yeah. It's as if these people don't realize that these guys have lives outside of hockey. And every once in a while going into taking a night off and playing games on a charity stream for a bit, it irritates me. And I think Leafs fans need to calm down. Your team is going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. And if not, I'll tell you right now, this is the last year. They didn't extend Dubas for a reason. Austin Matthews' contract going in, although during the media, he says how much he loves Toronto, it's family and this and that. I can tell you right now, if things go off the rails here, you're going to see a massive implosion in Toronto. I mean, they're going to make the playoffs, but at the same time, if the expectations aren't met, heads are going to roll in Leafland.
I'm glad to see Calgary got off to a good start, 3-0 start they're at because of all the changes on the high end for them with Huberdeau and Uyghur coming in, and out goes Gaudreau and Tkachuk. And speaking of Tkachuks, I think the best Tkachuk is Brady Tkachuk. I watched the Ottawa Senators the other day, and he really does. What is he, 2019? I don't know what he is. He leads that team. He leads this young Senators team that are very entertaining to watch. And Chris, I'll say this to you, not because you're a Montreal Canadian fan. I've never been a Montreal Canadian fan, but they are fun to watch as well. Two Canadian teams that here in the Maritimes we get to see a lot because most of their games are on, have been really, really fun to watch in the early going.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And again, very quickly before we move on, and I know I don't want to get into a Habs conversation, but you're right. They have been fun to watch. Goaltending was a question mark, but I got to talk about their defense. Watching Jack Guy come on in, listening to stories from coaches out of Hamilton saying, I'm glad he's not in the OHL anymore because the guy's a monster. Overall, they're fun to watch. Let's move on because I want to talk baseball. The playoffs are down to the Final Four. If the Yankees don't get through Houston, we could be in for a snooze fest of a World Series. But overall, let's break it down. We got Astros, Yankees. We got Phillies, Padres. Where's your head at? What do you think?
Well, again, we've seen it, Chris. Pitching is what makes the playoffs go round. We've had some explosive issues every now and then, but that's once you get into the bullpens and stuff like that. The starting pitching is the key. And going of the four teams that remain, it's the Astros have the best ERA in the playoffs and during the regular season of the remaining four teams. Now, you see Zach Wheeler and what he can do for the Phillies and what Bryce Harper can do. That's a pretty dangerous combination. Harper's been very consistent with a .407 batting average, Chris, 4 home runs, 7 RBI. Philly's one of those teams that it's like that 18th seed in the NHL that gets on a roll and all of a sudden starts steamrolling everybody because they were the lowest seed of anybody going into the playoffs. And here they're giving the Padres all they can handle. Not that the Padres are do all end all. They only won 88 games during the regular season. But I see the Astros, and I'm not sure who I see in the other side. I hope the Padres, because the Padres have never, ever been, well, I remember they played the Cubs in an NLCS once, but they've never been to the World Series. Have they, Chris? Do you know that?
I do not believe
I don't think they have.
I don't think they have either.
So I'd like to see them come out of the National League and against the Astros. I think the Astros are a better team than the Yankees.
I hope the Astros are a better team than the Yankees, although I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because at the end of the day, every time I think of Houston Astros, I think of that corrupt World Series.
I know. And didn't it start against the Yankees?
Yeah.
Was it 2017? Was it 2017? I think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So thanks to our crack producer who's instantly in the chat, 1998 World Series, Yankees over Padres. Yankees swept them.
Wow.
Thanks, Jay, for being on the ball there. I appreciate that.
Never knew that.
Let's
move on. NBA's coming up, Chris.
Season preview, man. I'll be really curious who we're going to be paying attention to. Obviously, you got to look at the Golden State Warriors again because they've been in the media a whole lot, although it looks like, cooler heads have prevailed, of course. Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole in the face, which was weird. The whole situation was weird, and then they suspended him indefinitely. They brought him back, and then they signed Poole to a massive extension. But overall, to me, you look at the Warriors, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Bucks, the Celtics, the 76ers. Like, what are you expecting to see this year?
Raptors do you have any 48 wins last year. Hope they get a few more than that. And I think we haven't talked or seen much about them in the national media. I'm talking about the American national media doesn't talk about them much. It's all about the Celtics and the Bucks and the 76ers. And they forget about the Heat. The Heat had 53 wins to win the Eastern Conference last year. Nobody seems to want to talk about it. Now the Heat have had some off-court issues. Here's the other thing. You talk about the Warriors having off-court issues. What about the Phoenix Suns and their ownership? And they led the Western Division, and all of NBA was 64 wins last year, and get bounced in the playoffs. And my team that I'm going to keep an eye on, because there's a Canadian connection in Jamal Murray, is the Denver Nuggets. I think with Jokic joining them and being being another season of them together, I think is going to be exciting. And I still think the Celtics might be the team to beat in the East. They started the season off on the right foot. And don't talk to me ever about those Brooklyn Nets. I don't care what they do. It's going to be like the Leafs. I want to watch them to see if they'll lose.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on the Brooklyn Nets side, which is too bad because I really wanted to see success there. I was a big Steve Nash guy. So when I saw him going there, I was like, maybe he's the guy who could right the ship there, handle the Kyries, handle the KDs. That's what I was rooting for. But now I'm at a point, I'm just like you. I tune in to hope that everything kind of implodes on the inside and none of these guys ever get to play again. Another team I'm going to keep a close eye on just because I really enjoy watching them is I'm going to watch the Dallas Mavericks a lot this year. I like Luka a lot, and I think Mark Cuban is ready at that point where he's about to just cut a check to see whatever he has to do to try to make a contending team come together. But overall,
Chris, what about Kawhi Leonard? Kawhi Leonard's going to actually start the season, and him and Paul George are going to play together. Are the experts thinking that's going to be the do-all end-all for the Clippers to rise in the Western Division?
Well, truth be told in Los Angeles, it doesn't matter. They're the team to watch because the Lakers are garbage. But overall, I hope they do. Look, like Raptors fans miss Kawhi Leonard dramatically. And unfortunately, Clippers fans haven't had a healthy him or Paul George for an entire season since they got there. And I know I truly hope to see something like that take place. It'd be good for Clippers fans. I just want to watch Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, kind of lose his mind on the sideline there if they do win something. But overall, the Clippers have a chance. I think they're going to have to surround them, get some good perimeter players out there. But to me right now, I agree with you. I think the Celtics are the team to watch, but I'm not going to sleep on the Raps though, bud. I think the Raps can get 50 games this year. I really do.
I think they can too. Well, there were 48 last year. There are 5 games out of first. I mean, you had the Heat, the Celtics, the Bucks, 76ers, and the Raptors. And Raptors avoided that play-in sort of crap, and I think they were really worthy. Now, you talked off the top of the show of seeing the Buffalo Bills in the opening week of the NFL. They played in a high-profile game against Kansas City last week as we move on to the NFL. How did you rate their performance? Did you think they were fortunate at the end to get that interception to close out the game? Because it looked very familiar to that playoff game where there was time on the clock for Mahomes, and the interception closed it out.
I think what was more wild than anything is the fact that Tony Romo called the score of that game before the game even started. He's like, yeah, this looks like a 24-20 football game. And I'm like, what is wrong with this man? The guy's a genius. But as somebody, I'm not going to use the game I saw as a measuring stick for the Buffalo Bills because they just put a beat down on the Pittsburgh Steelers. But going into that game, I mean, that's the game to watch. That's the game that everybody wanted to see. It was the rematch. And of course, the first time they met this year as well, that was Miami. I apologize. But yeah, this game here was the one where you want to see Josh Allen and Patty Mahomes go toe to toe. And when that's happening, I don't know if it's fortunate because they doubled down. They put a good solid defense together. And I think that's what they get paid to do because the Bills were Super Bowl favorites coming into it. And there's a reason for that. And I think they're just getting started now. Of course, look, Kansas City and Buffalo are going to meet again, Jerry, in the playoffs. It's going to happen. And it's going to be the game of the season again, I'm sure. But overall, Buffalo is just too deep. That defense is going to do what it has to do. And if they can sustain Patty Mahomes, I mean, sorry, Jason, Mr. Producer, I know you're a Chiefs fan, but you've had your moment in the shade. I think it's Bills time.
It only gets enhanced.
Bills Mafia is going to rise.
Right. It only enhances if the Bills can host that game. So they still have to serve the rest of the way for those two teams for that to happen. Of course, Kansas City has a better record. They get to host the game as well. What's interesting, I find this year, Chris, a lot of teams are 3-3, and a lot of power has shifted in the NFC. The NFC West, which was the Rams, San Francisco, Seattle, and Arizona. That was the scary division. Do you remember that? It was a scary division to play in. Well, it's not this year. It's 3 teams at 3-3. What has happened is the NFC East with the Eagles, the Giants, the Cowboys, and of course the Commanders are there. But we're talking about 6-0, 5-1, and 4-2. All of a sudden, they've risen up in power. Unfortunately, this week, Chris, you have 4 teams getting a bye, and it's the 5-1 Bills. It's the Rams have a good record, the defending champs. They're in a bye. They're always a highlight to watch. You have the Vikings at 5-1, and you have the Eagles at 6-0, all on a bye. There's not a whole lot of great games to watch, especially on Monday.
First of all, check your tone, because the 3-2-1 Indianapolis Colts have the biggest division game of the week. They're playing the Tennessee Titans this week. So that'll be, winner of that takes the outright. That's the AFC South division. I can tell you the snooze fest that has been. But for a fun fact for any Colts fans out there other than me, last week was the first time that Matt Ryan hasn't been sacked an entire game since the season started. So we're trending in the right direction. But yeah, no, I don't really know. I mean, Chiefs and Niners should be an all right game.
Yes, you got the Chicago and New England on Monday night. My gosh.
Right. And then meanwhile, you got Aaron Rodgers on the Green Bay side, who literally didn't look that great last week. And unfortunately was the hammered meme of the internet this week. Yeah, he was not a very happy camper overall, but I think he'll turn that around. Green Bay is going to be good. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the NFL, not really the juggernaut offensive games we've been used to seeing recently.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe we could see it. Who knows? All I know is that I just hope that Indy comes away with a win. It looks like Jonathan Taylor is playing. Looks like Kwity Paye's playing. So we'll see exactly how it all is going to play out. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just know that it's football season, and even if there's no real good games on, I'm going to continue to watch because, hey, that's what we do. Crazy to think, Jerry, the show's almost over. It's time to head into the wrap, and we're going to start with one of your favorite topics to talk about. I want to check in on the Canadian Football League.
Absolutely, Chris. 2 weeks left in the schedule for the CFL, and it's Hamilton and Saskatchewan that are battling for playoff spots. We'll keep our eye on them. But what is happening is there's a battle for first place in the East between the Argonauts and the Montreal, I was going to say Alouettes. Yes, it is the Alouettes. Remember, they used to be called the Concords or something like that. Anyways,
many moons ago, my friend, many moons ago.
They play each other in the last 2 weeks of the season with first place on the line. First place in the West has been wrapped up for a long time, as the Bombers have clinched that. They're 14-3 and have one more game left on their schedule. Chris, injuries is the nature of the beast in the NHL. What are you hearing?
Some big named forwards and defensemen are already out on the IR. Panthers star defenseman Eric Blad already put on the LTIR. They'll be without him till at least mid-November, they're saying, possibly longer. They put the star defenseman on LTIR with a groin injury. It's unfortunate because he suffered a big injury last year as well, missed a lot of time. But either way, they're saying it could be a while. But on the flip side, captain of the previous last year's Stanley Cup champions, Gabriel Landeskog, is going to be out indefinitely as well. Another big loss. They was a 5-2 loss to Anaheim, I believe. But at the same time, it's like the second player on Colorado's top line to come off. What they're saying at this point now, Bednar has said this is not a week-to-week situation. He could be out for quite some time. He's been hurt over the last couple of games. Went to practice on Sunday, had some discomfort. They put him on the shelf. Either way, I hope he's a speedy recovery because those are some big names already on the shelf. Give me a check-in on the Maritime Hockey League. What's going on there?
Well, big news of the MHL this week, Chris. There's a coaching change, and it happened for the Miramichi Timberwolves. Longtime coach, 12 years exact for Rob Campbell, has been let go. And they're bringing in Corey Baker. Now, Corey Baker, that might be a name you're familiar with, a Miramichi boy who played for the Moncton Wildcats and then was traded to Val-d'Or, went to the President's Cup and won that with Val-d'Or and got to within an overtime loss to a Memorial Cup. Anyways, he's been over in Europe playing hockey. He's been coaching and playing in Finland. He's coming home. He's taken over the reins of the Miramichi Timberwolves, and he's taken over a couple of guys that have been pretty hot, Chris. They're 1 and 2 in scoring in the MHL from the Miramichi Timberwolves in Derek Dubé-Plouffe and Jacob Santerre. They're 1 and 2 on the Timberwolves, who are having a great start to the season, but not as good as the Summerside Western Capitals, who still sit on top of the Northern Division at 6-1. Meanwhile, the Valley Wildcats are 6-1, 1-1 to lead the South Division. Big game this week. Edmonton is going to host Summerside as Summerside comes to the Northwest to take on Edmonton and the Grand Falls Rapids. Inside the NBA, it's a great show, Chris. You got news about it?
Oh, absolutely love to see this. Kenny, Shaq, Ernie, and Chuck, absolutely signed their long-term deals. Warner Brothers has doubled down on these guys. They've put all their cards in on the table. Terms are not disclosed at this point, but I would have to say that inside the NBA, those four in front of a desk, probably one of my favorite sports panels in the world to watch. The entertainment level's through the roof. Of course, the NBA kicking off this week. You got to be thrilled to hear it. Rumors are floating around that Barkley's contract's at about 10 years, but overall, nothing's been disclosed at this point. But either way, I'm excited to see your four favorite NBA players or commentators sit at a table again and watch Shaq fight Chuck, see exactly what's going to happen from all-time supremacy. Big news, some updates, some weird, records floating around in AUS right now, Jerry. I mean, what's going on there?
Well, it's early days, Chris, but it's not familiar sights to see the University of Brunswick Reds at 1-2 in their first three games. Won their home opener, then lost in Moncton, then last weekend lost at St. Mary's. St. Mary's, matter of fact, leads the standings at 3-0. Moncton sits at 2-2. So unfamiliar territory for Gardner McDougall and his Reds. I'm sure they'll right the ship. But when I saw these standings and these results from the last weekend, a little bit of a shock to the system for this guy. But the AUS is also underway, up and going. Tom Brady, did he catch a bouquet at a wedding, Chris? Give us some news about that.
Oh, yeah, I don't think you can open a website or listen to any sports podcast without hearing Tom Brady's name all over it to begin with. Of course, this weekend, Tom Brady is now being referred to as the guy who was reaming out his O-line on the sidelines, caught all on camera. Meanwhile, there's a lot of rumors floating around, public speculation saying the O-line's given up on Tom Brady. I mean, Tom Brady's been in the news ever since this football season started 6 weeks ago, of course, with everything that's going on. But yeah, you're right. He was at Robert Kraft's wedding, which I won't even get into because that's completely unorthodox as it is. Tom Brady was there, but Bill Belichick wasn't. I think that's a bit bizarre. But overall, it was late for practice on Saturday. Next thing you know, on Sunday, they were getting hammered and he was yelling at his O-line. So whatever Tom Brady's going through, look, the big question remains is Tom Brady get a pass because he's the GOAT? Or, and I was like, at this point, it's starting to become old for me. I wish he would have stayed retired. I don't think, when Gronk said, I'm done, I'm not coming back, like I'm out, I think Tom should have said the same thing, but hey, that's why I shoot this show from my basement, and I'm not in the NFL. Well, Jerry, it's been a great show, man. It was great to be on the air with you again tonight. We hope everybody's enjoyed it, and we'll see you next Thursday.